Have you ever noticed how some friendships seem to outlive fame, distance, and even time itself? That's exactly the kind of bond Matthew Perry and Jennifer Aniston shared. When the world first heard of Perry's passing, it wasn't just another celebrity headline, it was the loss of a man who had made millions laugh and cry through his wit, charm, and vulnerability. For fans of Friends, it felt personal, almost like losing one of their own. As tributes poured in, many waited in silence for one voice, Jennifer's. She was more than a co-star to Matthew. She was his confidant, his supporter, and, in many ways, his lifeline during some of his darkest moments. What she eventually said, and how she said it, revealed not just her grief, but the enduring love and compassion that defined their friendship. When news of Matthew Perry's sudden death broke, it felt like the air had been sucked out of Hollywood. Social media erupted within minutes, timelines filled with broken hearts, crying emojis, and endless clips of Chandler Bing's iconic one-liners. It wasn't just fans mourning a television character, it was a collective grief for the man who had given laughter a face and sarcasm a soul. For decades, Perry had been a symbol of clever humor mixed with subtle pain, someone whose comedic timing hid the struggles that would later define much of his private life. In Los Angeles, news crews gathered outside his home, while across the globe, networks replayed Friends montages in tribute. It didn't matter what generation you belonged to the moment you heard "I'll be there for you." It suddenly carried new weight. This wasn't just nostalgia, it was mourning wrapped in memory. But amid the noise, one silence stood out. Jennifer Aniston, the co-star who had been closest to Perry, said nothing. For days, she stayed quiet, even as other cast members released heartfelt statements. The world waited, and the speculation grew. Was she too grief-stricken to speak, or simply choosing to mourn in private? Those who knew her understood it wasn't indifference, it was heartbreak. Behind that silence lay a friendship spanning nearly 3 decades, one built on shared laughter and quiet understanding. While fans remembered Chandler and Rachel's playful chemistry, few realized that off-screen, Jennifer had been a pillar of compassion in Matthew's often turbulent life. His struggles with addiction had been public knowledge, but his healing was often nurtured by a small circle, and Jennifer was always at the center of it. So, when the news broke that he was gone, it didn't just hit her as a loss of a co-star, it struck like the loss of family. Hollywood paused, fans wept, and in the middle of that global sadness stood Jennifer's silence, profound, respectful, and heartbreakingly human. She would eventually speak, and when she did, it became one of the most emotional moments in recent Hollywood history. From the very first table read of Friends in 1994, there was an ease between Jennifer Aniston and Matthew Perry that felt completely natural. Their on-screen chemistry, Rachel's amused eye rolls, meeting Chandler's self-deprecating wit, mirrored a genuine connection off-camera. The cast often described themselves as a family, but among them, Jennifer and Matthew seemed to share a quieter wavelength. She had an instinct for noticing when he retreated behind humor, and he trusted her enough to drop the act. Crew members later recalled small moments, the way she'd nudge him before a scene to make him laugh, or how he'd wait for her approval after landing a joke. It wasn't flirtation, it was friendship built on professional respect and emotional intuition. As fame exploded around them, the pressures were immense. Matthew, always a perfectionist, felt responsible for every laugh. Jennifer, already attuned to his moods, often acted as a stabilizing force. When tabloids began circling his private struggles, she never joined the noise. Instead, she stayed present, inviting him to dinner, checking in between seasons, making sure he felt seen as more than Chandler Bing. In interviews, Matthew later admitted that during those difficult years of addiction and self-doubt, Jennifer's kindness was one of the constants that reminded him he still mattered. Their friendship endured beyond the show's finale in 2004. They would occasionally reunite over coffee or text about life's absurdities. Jennifer often described the cast as siblings for life, yet her tone always softened when speaking of Matthew. She admired his intellect and the way his humor carried an undercurrent of honesty. Even during his lowest moments, she believed he could rise again. When he published his memoir, Friends, Lovers, and the Big Terrible Thing, Jennifer publicly praised his courage, calling his story brave and healing. That encouragement meant the world to him. He said so more. than once. It's easy to romanticize Hollywood friendships, but theirs was grounded in empathy. Jennifer never tried to fix Matthew, she simply refused to abandon him. And in a city where loyalty is rare, that simple act of steadfast care became one of the most beautiful, unspoken truths about their relationship. When Matthew Perry spoke candidly about his years battling addiction, one detail consistently emerged. Jennifer Aniston was the friend who never stopped checking on him. In an interview promoting his memoir, he said it without hesitation. She was the one who reached out the most. It was a simple line, but it revealed everything. Behind the fame, the laughter, and the years of sitcom glory was a man who had nearly lost himself, and a woman who refused to let that happen quietly. Jennifer's way of caring was subtle, never performative. She didn't stage interventions for cameras or leak supportive statements to the press. She sent messages, left voicemails, and sometimes just asked him to meet for coffee. For someone like Matthew, who admitted feeling ashamed of letting friends see his worst days, those gestures meant survival. Addiction often isolates, convincing its victims that everyone has given up. Jennifer's consistency chipped away at that lie. During production of the Friends reunion special in 2021, witnesses noticed the warmth between them. He looked nervous and fragile at times, yet whenever Jennifer caught his eye, he relaxed. After filming, he reportedly thanked her for always keeping the door open, a quiet acknowledgement of years of compassion. Even when he disappeared for months at a time, she'd send another text, a small reminder that he still mattered to someone who knew the real him. People close to Jennifer have said that Matthew's honesty about his struggles touched her deeply. She admired that he used his platform to help others, and often told him she was proud. Their friendship evolved into something akin to unconditional love, free of romance but filled with genuine care. That bond became a blueprint for empathy in an industry often ruled by image. When news broke of his death, that history of kindness suddenly took on new weight. Fans revisited the interviews, the quotes, the gentle moments, and realized that Jennifer's loyalty had been one of the few constants in Matthew's chaotic world. She had done what so many promised, but few managed. She stayed. And in doing so, she proved that the most powerful support doesn't always come from grand gestures, but from the quiet persistence of simply checking in again and again. To understand the depth of Jennifer Aniston and Matthew Perry's friendship, you have to go back to where it all began, the Warner Brothers lot in Burbank, California. For 10 years, that stage became their second home. The orange couch, the purple apartment door, and the sound of audience laughter shaped a cultural era. But behind those lights and cameras, a real bond was forming. Jennifer and Matthew were part of a cast that changed television forever. Yet even in that whirlwind of success, they always found moments to connect. During filming breaks, the cast often gathered for inside jokes and small talks. Matthew's humor was the heartbeat of those moments, while Jennifer's laughter, warm and effortless, often encouraged him to go even further. She brought balance to his nervous energy. He brought levity to her intensity. It was a rhythm only they seemed to fully understand. Crew members would later recall seeing them leaning on the kitchen counter of Monica's apartment set, laughing quietly about something trivial. Those moments, though simple, painted the picture of a friendship that transcended performance. When the cameras weren't rolling, the pair often discussed life, fame, and the strange weight that came with it. Jennifer had a grounded presence that comforted him, while Matthew often used humor to mask his anxiety. Their conversations weren't always about work. Sometimes it was about loneliness, the price of fame, or even just where to find good food after rehearsal. She once described him as a genius comic with a heart too big for this business, and that sentiment reflected how deeply she understood him. Years later, when fans revisit those classic Friends scenes, they can sense an undercurrent of authenticity. The laughter wasn't always scripted, the glances often weren't rehearsed. You can see genuine affection between Chandler and Rachel, born from the trust between Jennifer and Matthew. It's this invisible thread, the kind that can't be faked, that made their friendship one of the emotional anchors of the show. Those 10 years on the Warner Brothers set created a shared history that neither fame nor tragedy could erase. For Jennifer, those memories would later become both a comfort and a source of pain, reminders of a time when laughter was pure and life still felt whole. After Matthew Perry's death, friends close to Jennifer Aniston revealed that she was utterly heartbroken. Though she tried to grieve privately, Those who knew her said she carried an unbearable sense of guilt, the kind that comes from loving someone you couldn't fully save. She had done what she could, reached out, supported him, reminded him he wasn't alone. But grief rarely listens to logic. It often whispers, what ifs? What if she had called more often? What if she had noticed something sooner? Those thoughts lingered in her silence before she finally spoke. For Jennifer, losing Matthew wasn't just losing a friend, it was losing a decade of shared memories, laughter, and moments that defined who they were. On set, she had watched him transform from the witty, bright-eyed comic everyone adored into a man quietly fighting personal battles. She once said that watching a friend suffer publicly while the world demanded humor from them was one of the hardest things she had ever witnessed. That empathy stayed with her long after the cameras stopped rolling. In the days following his passing, Jennifer reportedly isolated herself, seeking space away from the noise of speculation and media frenzy. Friends described her as numb but reflective. She reread old messages, revisited photos, and tried to hold on to the parts of him untouched by pain, the kindness, the brilliance, the humor. She wasn't alone in her grief, but hers carried a specific weight. She had been there through the storms, and now she was left with silence. Her eventual statement didn't dwell on sorrow. It celebrated his spirit, yet between every line, there was unspoken grief, the ache of someone who had truly known him. Jennifer's tears weren't for a fallen celebrity. They were for the boyish friend who used to crack jokes between takes and the man who had once told her she meant the world to him. Grief doesn't end, it simply changes shape. For Jennifer, that pain became something she carried quietly, transforming it into compassion for others struggling as Matthew had. And though the world moved on, she continued to hold him close, not as a memory, but as a reminder of the fragile beauty of human connection. When Jennifer Aniston finally broke her silence, the world stopped again. Her tribute to Matthew Perry, posted on Instagram, was not just a message, it was an emotional confession written from a place of profound love and loss. She shared a black and white photo of the two of them laughing on set, his head thrown back in joy, her eyes fixed on him with warmth. The caption began with heartbreak and ended with grace. It wasn't long, but every sentence carried the weight of decades. She wrote about how they had always made each other laugh, and how that laughter had been her favorite memory of him. She described the pain of saying goodbye to someone who had been such a massive part of her life, but also the peace in knowing he was finally free from the struggles that had haunted him for so long. What made the post so powerful wasn't celebrity polish, it was its honesty. There was no attempt to sound perfect, no rehearsed tone. It was simply Jennifer speaking as a friend who loved and lost. Within minutes, the post flooded timelines worldwide. Fans, co-stars, and even public figures commented with heartbreak and gratitude. The photo alone became a symbol of genuine friendship, one that had endured both fame and fragility. People reposted her words with tears, saying it was the most real thing they had read from Hollywood in years. What many didn't notice were the details in her words, the subtle references to their last conversation, the way she echoed phrases Matthew himself had used in his memoir, and her choice to end with love, not despair. It was as if she wanted his story to close gently, not with tragedy, but with peace. Her message reminded everyone that grief is not something to perform, it's something to feel. She didn't speak for the cameras or the press. She spoke to him and to all who have ever lost a friend they wished they could have saved. In that moment, Jennifer Aniston didn't just mourn Matthew Perry. She honored him, and in doing so, she gave millions permission to grieve, to remember, and to love a little deeper. Jennifer Aniston's tribute to Matthew Perry wasn't just emotional, it was layered with subtle meanings that revealed far more than what first met the eye. To casual readers, it was a moving goodbye. To those who truly knew their friendship, it was a coded message of love, remembrance, and closure. Every word seemed carefully chosen, yet spoken straight from the heart. When she wrote about their laughter being her favorite memory, it wasn't poetic exaggeration, it was literal truth. For years, laughter had been the glue between them. Even during Matthew's darkest battles, humor remained, their shared language, a way of reaching each other when words failed. Observers noticed that Jennifer's caption echoed several phrases from Matthew's memoir, Friends, Lovers, and the Big Terrible Thing. He had written about how laughter was his medicine, his gift to others, and his hope for redemption. Her post felt like a continuation of that message, as if she wanted him to know that his laughter had healed more than he ever realized. The black and white photo she chose, where both were laughing uncontrollably, carried its own symbolism, simplicity, timelessness, and authenticity. It reminded fans that behind the makeup, scripts, and cameras, they were just two people who genuinely enjoyed being around each other. She also included the final words Matthew had once said to her in private, though subtly rephrased, about always being there for each other. That single line, mirroring the show's theme song, was Jennifer's quiet farewell. It wasn't grand or theatrical, but deeply human. Fans analyzed the post endlessly, and yet, what made it so powerful was its restraint. Jennifer didn't use extravagant adjectives or over-explain her grief. She allowed silence and simplicity to carry emotion the same way she had honored him in life. Ultimately, her message wasn't just a goodbye, it was a celebration. She turned mourning into gratitude and pain into remembrance, and for those who read between the lines, her words offered comfort, a reassurance that the connection they shared didn't end with his passing. It simply transformed into something eternal, memory, legacy, and love, preserved through words that spoke louder than any public statement ever could. In the weeks before his passing, Matthew Perry was said to be in one of his most hopeful phases. He had been open about his journey toward recovery, discussing new creative projects and even a potential follow-up to his memoir. Friends and colleagues mentioned that he seemed calm, healthier, and more centered than in previous years. He was swimming regularly, writing, and reportedly discussing ideas for helping others battling addiction, a cause close to his heart. Yet, behind that apparent stability, there was an air of fragility that only those closest to him could sense. Jennifer Aniston, as always, had remained in touch. Sources close to both confirmed that they had exchanged messages not long before his death. She had congratulated him on maintaining his sobriety and encouraged him to keep focusing on the positive. Matthew had responded warmly, expressing gratitude and joking that she still texted like a producer, a little inside humor that captured their dynamic perfectly. That small interaction would later become one of Jennifer's most treasured memories. What few realized was how closely Jennifer had monitored his well-being over the years. She wasn't intrusive, but she cared deeply. Whenever rumors of relapse surfaced, she would quietly check in through mutual friends, making sure he had the support he needed. Their connection wasn't daily, but it was enduring, the kind of bond where months could pass, and yet the affection remained intact. After his death, Jennifer reportedly revisited those last exchanges repeatedly. It was bittersweet comforting that their final words were kind, but heartbreaking that she never got to see him again. Insiders described her as inconsolable, but also deeply reflective about the unpredictable nature of healing. Matthew's passing, though peaceful in circumstance, left an ache that reverberated through everyone who had loved him. Jennifer found solace in the belief that he was finally free from pain, free from addiction, and perhaps, at last, at peace with himself. Still, the quiet knowledge that she had texted him only weeks before made the loss even more personal. It wasn't just the world that lost Matthew Perry. Jennifer Aniston lost a piece of her own history. When Matthew Perry passed away, the remaining Friends cast members, Jennifer Aniston, Courtney Cox, Lisa Kudrow, Matt LeBlanc, and David Schwimmer, were bound together once again, this time not by a reunion special, but by shared heartbreak. Their bond had always gone beyond television, but the tragedy reminded them of how intertwined their lives truly were. For nearly 10 years, they had shared everything: fame, laughter, exhaustion, and the kind of closeness that can't be recreated. After the news broke, the group released a joint statement, brief but deeply emotional. It read, "We are all so utterly devastated by the loss of Matthew. We were more than just castmates. We are a family." Those words resonated across the world because they weren't written for publicity. They were written from grief. Jennifer, who reportedly helped draft the statement, wanted to ensure it captured the love and unity they still shared. Privately, the five met to mourn together away from the public eye. Multiple sources described their gathering as quiet but cathartic. Stories were shared, tears flowed, and laughter occasionally broke the heaviness. Courtney was said to have reminisced about their earliest days on set. Lisa brought up Matthew's knack for turning awkward silence into hysterical comedy. Jennifer, meanwhile, listened more than she spoke, holding on to every memory like a treasure. Their collective grief became a symbol of enduring friendship, proof that what they built in the 1,990 seconds wasn't fiction. Even decades later, their affection had not faded. Each of them had stood by Matthew through his ups and downs in different ways, but Jennifer's role had always been that of quiet strength. In that small private circle, she remained composed, comforting the others even as her own heart broke. Fans felt their pain too. Online, people across generations described how Friends had shaped their lives, how these 6 people had made of them laugh through loneliness, heartbreak, and hard times. And now, seeing the 5 unite for Matthew reminded everyone that genuine bonds, the kind built on trust and shared experience, don't fade with time. They endure, even in grief. And for Jennifer, that unity was both a comfort and a final tribute to the man who made them all laugh just a little harder and love just a little deeper. For Jennifer Aniston, losing Matthew Perry felt like losing him twice. The first time was when Friends ended and she said goodbye to Chandler Bing, a character who had shaped a decade of her life. The second time, in real life, was unbearably final. Watching reruns now brings both comfort and pain. Every line, every smile is a reminder of who he truly was behind the character, brilliant, fragile, and deeply human. Those who knew Jennifer say she struggled to separate the actor from his role because both had become intertwined with her memories. She once said that Matthew's laughter could change the whole energy in a room, and even in grief, that's what she holds on to. The loss wasn't just of a co-star, but of a brother-like friend whose humor had once been her greatest source of light. When Jennifer Aniston finally spoke publicly, she didn't just honor Matthew Perry, she delivered a message that transcended Hollywood. She reminded the world that addiction isn't weakness, but a human struggle deserving compassion. Her words reflected Matthew's own mission to help others find hope. She urged people to reach out to friends, to keep checking in, and to never underestimate the power of kindness. In doing so, she turned personal pain into advocacy, reminding everyone that laughter and love can save lives. Jennifer's tribute became more than a farewell, it was a lesson in empathy. She wanted the world to remember Matthew not for how he died, but for how he lived funny, brilliant, and endlessly giving. Through her grief, she carried his purpose forward. Jennifer's tribute united millions in shared grief. Within hours, social media filled with tears, laughter, and memories. Fans from every generation spoke of how Matthew Perry's humor had helped them through their own struggles, how Chandler Bing had been a friend during lonely nights. Her honesty made everyone feel connected, not to a celebrity, but to 2 real people who had shared a bond of love and loss. The comments turned her page into a memorial filled with gratitude. Jennifer was reportedly touched by how deeply the world responded, realizing that Matthew's legacy wasn't measured by fame, but by hearts healed through laughter. Her post reminded everyone that grief, when shared, becomes gentler, and that true friendship can ripple across the world long after one life ends. In the months after his passing, Jennifer Aniston quietly began honoring Matthew Perry's dream to help others battling addiction. She has reportedly supported charities aligned with his mission and encouraged open conversations about recovery. Friends say she believes continuing his work is the best way to keep his memory alive. It's how she finds peace, by turning heartbreak into purpose. She often says Matthew wanted his legacy to be more than laughter, he wanted to save lives. Through her compassion and consistency, Jennifer ensures that his story remains a source of hope. In every interview, every subtle tribute, she keeps that promise alive. Matthew's laughter may have faded from the stage, but through Jennifer's love and advocacy, his spirit continues to make the world a little kinder. Saying goodbye to Matthew Perry will never be easy for Jennifer Aniston. Their friendship spanned decades of laughter, vulnerability, and unwavering loyalty. She has described grief as something that doesn't disappear, it changes shape, and that's exactly what her love for him has done. He's gone, but his humor, warmth, and resilience remain everywhere, in reruns, in memories, and in the millions he inspired. Jennifer's silence, her tears, and finally her words formed a journey of acceptance. She didn't just mourn him, she celebrated him. And as the world continues to watch Friends and hear Chandler's timeless wit, one thing is certain: Matthew Perry will never truly be gone. Through Jennifer's love and remembrance, he remains what he always was, unforgettable. In the end, Jennifer Aniston's tribute to Matthew Perry wasn't just a farewell, it was a reminder of how powerful love, loyalty, and compassion can be. She didn't mourn him in the spotlight, she mourned him as a true friend, with quiet strength and heartfelt honesty. Through her words, she taught millions that grief isn't weakness, it's proof that someone mattered deeply. Matthew's laughter continues to echo through television screens, but his real legacy lives in the empathy he inspired and the lives he touched. Jennifer's story reminds us to cherish the people who make us laugh, to check in on those who seem strong, and to speak kindness while we still can. Because in the end, it's not fame or fortune that endures, it's love. If this story touched you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more heartfelt Hollywood stories that celebrate friendship, resilience, and the beauty of being human.